At exactly 3:12 a.m., the front window of 113 Cedar Street shattered like a nerve snapping in the middle of a quiet dream. A brick tore through the stillness, carrying not just concrete and rage, but a message no one needed help reading. Scrawled in red paint, streaked with something that looked too thick to be just paint. Get out, old man! Inside, Elijah Carter, 76 years old, body worn like a soft hymn, stood still in the dark, clutching a fading photograph of his late wife, Ruth. He didn't flinch, didn't cry out. There was no fear in his eyes, only a sorrow so ancient it looked like it belonged to the earth itself. He didn't know who threw the brick, but he knew why. Because some people will burn a house down before they let the truth walk out of it alive. The courtroom that winter morning was colder than any open sky, not from the draft, but from the absence of something more human. Compassion, maybe. Elijah's footsteps echoed across the marble floor, soft, rhythmic, slow. One hand clutched Ruth's photograph, the other gripped a folder stuffed with yellowing deeds, brittle tax receipts, and hand-marked maps. Documents gathered not in haste, but in hope. Proof that the land he stood on had been bought, not borrowed, by his great-grandfather, a freed slave who had traded wages, dignity, and the years of his life for just one patch of permanence. He brought no lawsuit born of revenge. He brought the truth, because in a world that forgets, someone has to remember. Judge Winston Beckley presided like a man sculpted out of stone, white hair combed tight, jaw locked, hands folded with the ease of someone too powerful to be challenged and too far removed to care. He barely glanced up as the case was announced. Elijah Carter versus Kingsland Development. Elijah took the witness stand. His hands trembled, but his voice didn't crack. This land's been in my family for 154 years, since my great-grandfather, Benjamin Carter, earned enough to buy it with his hands. We paid taxes, we planted trees, we buried our dead in its soil, we built a life here. He offered papers, photos, a living thread of legacy. He told them about Ruth, who had kept every receipt, annotated every shift in title language, documented every whisper of foul play with the same discipline she used to balance their checkbook. But before he could lay the last document on the table, Beckley lifted a hand, dismissive, cold, almost bored. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice dry as sawdust, "the history of your family, while touching, is irrelevant to the legality of this matter. The current title belongs to Kingsland. Unless you can present evidence of fraud or coercion, your claims are anecdotal, not admissible in this court." Elijah froze. The air shifted. "But sir, Ruth, she documented everything. If you just—" "Enough," Beckley interrupted, striking his gavel. "This court is not a museum for memories. We rule on fact, not sentiment. Case dismissed." The sound of the gavel hit the room like a final heartbeat. The photo of Ruth slipped from Elijah's hand, cracked against the floor. Pages spilled from the folder like old bones shaken from a grave, floating, fluttering, forgotten. A snide voice behind him snorted. "Just another old man clinging to a dead past." No one stopped it. No one spoke. Elijah bent down, slowly, deliberately, to pick up each page. No one helped. No one met his eyes. But if anyone had looked closely, they might have seen it, a light still flickering in his gaze. Not of defiance, not of anger, but of promise. Because someone, somewhere, had already written the truth, and he would not let her voice be silenced. Not now. Not ever. The court was adjourned. The heavy wooden doors groaned shut behind Elijah Carter like a quiet funeral procession. No words, no comfort, just the finality of silence. No one offered him a ride home. No one asked if he was okay. He walked alone, cutting through the chilled streets, past rows of gray-painted houses that had seen better days. He moved slowly, back to his small apartment, the one where Ruth's presence still lingered in the corners, as if she'd merely stepped out to buy a bundle of greens. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't need to. Elijah was used to the dim amber glow that filtered through the threadbare curtain of a window long jammed shut. That same light reached for the armchair beside the bookcase. Ruth's spot. The room was still, but every object seemed to whisper in soft memory. She's still here. He placed the battered case file on the kitchen table. From the pocket over his heart, he pulled out the photograph of Ruth, this time, thankfully, still intact. He set it down gently. Then, without a word, he took his seat, bony fingers interlocked, resting in his lap. And then his eyes found it. The old radio, its once silver frame now dulled, the plastic surface scuffed and tired. Ruth used to listen to gospel music on it every Sunday morning while brewing coffee, or soft instrumentals in the evening as she scribbled away in her notebook. Elijah had never given it much thought, but now something tugged at his memory. Ruth had a way of glancing at that radio like it held secrets she hadn't yet spoken aloud. He rose carefully and approached it. His hands, once strong enough to lift lumber and grandchildren, now trembled as he unscrewed the back panel. A quiet click. A small compartment opened, and inside, taped neatly behind the speaker, was something he never expected. A USB drive. On its surface, in clean, deliberate strokes of black ink, Ruth had written, "If they burn the papers, the truth will still be here." Elijah stood frozen. The room held its breath with him. He didn't know much about computers. Didn't have to, because in that moment, he knew exactly who he needed. At 7:52 p.m., the doorbell rang. He opened it to find a tall, lean figure, sharp-featured, thoughtful eyes, and the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. Andre, his grandson, a tech engineer raised in the age of circuits and speed, but whose roots still ran deep in soil his great-great-grandfather once claimed with calloused hands. Andre stepped inside without a word. His eyes found the USB instantly. Elijah extended it toward him, his fingers still trembling. "It's from your grandmother," he said quietly. "She knew. They wouldn't listen to me." Andre nodded, said nothing, and sat. He plugged the drive into his laptop. The screen flickered, a soft ding, and then folders. Dozens of them. Photographs of tax bills, audio files of phone calls with the county office, snapshots of unfamiliar men from Kingsland Development, showing up unannounced with papers in hand and fake smiles, scans of redacted contracts, spreadsheets comparing sudden tax hikes across homes in the same black neighborhood. One Excel file stood out, cross-match patterns. Andre opened it. His eyes narrowed. "Oh my God," he murmured. "It's not just you. There are at least 12 families. Same document template, same filing day, same tax anomalies." He scrolled to the bottom. A single note from Ruth sat quietly in the last cell. "This is a system, not a mistake." Elijah sat in silence. But inside, a storm brewed, slow and seething. A dying woman. Why spend her last days this way? Why not rest? Why not enjoy the music, the sunset, the small comfort of silence? Why dig through papers, record every strange phone call, and trace every forged line on every page? Perhaps because she knew that one day justice would lose its voice, and on that day someone would need to hear the whisper of truth. Andre inhaled deeply. His fingers flew across the keyboard. "I'll back it all up," he said. "Cloud, local drive, military-grade encryption. If they try to wipe this, they won't even come close." Elijah reached out, placing a weathered hand on his grandson's shoulder. He didn't say a word, just nodded, as if whispering to Ruth across time. "We're not done yet." The tiny apartment where Elijah and Andre sat was swallowed by night. The only light still flickering came from the pale blue glow of the laptop screen, a small rectangle of illumination in a world gone dim. In that cold, sterile light, two men, separated by generations, joined by blood, stared at one thing: the truth. Andre scrolled through the files his grandmother, Ruth, had left behind, not with the click-happy urgency of someone browsing data, but with the reverence of a man handling a sacred will. But these weren't just digital folders. They were a map, a constellation of systemic crime, drawn out in rising tax numbers, repeated technical errors, and land transfers that happened without the landowners ever showing up. 12 families, 12 lives disrupted, and likely many more. This wasn't just about his family anymore. This was a fissure stretching across decades, a silent break so long ignored, it had started to feel like fate. Andre gripped the mouse tighter, his eyes sharpened, a new fire igniting. The kind that comes when a young man realizes he might actually be able to do something that matters. The next morning, Andre built a simple anonymous website. He uploaded everything: spreadsheets, audio files, scanned receipts, Ruth's meticulous call logs. No name, no credit, just one line at the bottom of the page. This is what my grandmother spent her life proving. Don't let her be silenced in death. It didn't take long. A local civic forum shared the link, then a neighborhood group, then someone posted it to a wider network. And like a match thrown into dry grass, the truth caught fire. Comments poured in. People shared the site, searched for their parents' names, their grandparents. A retired man from the next state called the number listed in Ruth's file. His voice shook. I got hit with the same tax hikes. I lost my house too. Andre read every message, every email. Fury, confusion, heartbreak. It came in waves, from people who had thought they were alone, now realizing they were part of something bigger and darker. He knew then he had done the right thing. But doing what's right doesn't mean you're safe. That night, after picking up printed copies of the files from a local shop, just in case the website was taken down, Andre returned home to find a thick brown envelope stuffed in the mailbox. No return address. Sealed tight. The handwriting scrawled across the front was rushed, uneven. Stop, or your grandfather will be next. Inside was a photo. Elijah standing alone in front of First Baptist Church, where he still went every Sunday since 1968. Coat buttoned, Bible in hand, captured from a distance, but clear enough to see. A 76-year-old man simply trying to live with quiet dignity in a world that had long stopped offering it. Andre froze. His chest tightened, not out of fear for himself, but because Elijah hadn't missed a Sunday. That morning, like every week, he had walked to church, taking his usual route past the alley behind the bakery. He never saw the two men waiting in the shadows. The first punch landed hard in his ribs. The second caught his face square. He crumpled like an old oak felled without warning, clawing at the dirt, reaching for the iron fence, breathlessly gasping, "Lord, help me!" before the men vanished into the dark. And in the hiss of the night, one of them muttered into his ear, "Keep digging and we'll bury you first." At the hospital, Andre sat motionless in the ER waiting room, knuckles white around his phone, eyes red-rimmed from a storm he couldn't cry out. He hadn't called his mother, or anyone. He just stared at the polished floor like it might split open and answer the one question pulsing through his mind. What do I do now? The door swung open. A doctor stepped out. Elijah Carter has 2 fractured ribs, some internal bruising, and a gash on his cheek. He's awake. He wants to see you. Andre entered quietly. The lights in the room were dim, the kind designed to comfort, not expose. Elijah lay still but conscious, eyes open, bruised but clear. His hand trembled, reaching for his grandson's. Andre dropped to his knees beside the bed. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. If I hadn't—" Elijah cut him off. His voice was thin but firm, like a blade wrapped in cloth. "If we don't do this, who will?" Andre bowed his head into his grandfather's palm. He didn't say another word, because in that moment he understood. When blood stains the sidewalk outside a church, the truth is no longer a choice. It becomes a vow. 6 weeks after the assault, Elijah Carter returned to court. He was still the same old man, silver hair combed back, a faint scar trailing along his cheek, walking stiffly, supported by a worn walnut cane. But his eyes hadn't aged a day. Beside him walked Andre, jaw set tight, and Rosalind Drake, a black attorney in her 30s with a high ponytail and a slate gray blazer that matched her tone. Focused, measured, and unwavering. She wasn't famous, didn't have a string of viral cases to her name, but she had something most lawyers no longer carried. A belief that the law, even now, could still do the right thing. They arrived early. Courtroom 4 of Middleton District Courthouse was as cold and familiar as ever. White walls, heavy drapes, and the faint smell of overworked copy machines. "You okay?" Rosalind asked gently, her eyes flicking to Elijah like she feared he might collapse at any moment. Elijah nodded, slowly, solemnly. He had come prepared, not just with documents, but with everything he had left: blood, tears, and the promise he had etched deep into his soul. When the judge entered, this time Judge Wallace, the room rose. He was a composed man, somewhere in his 50s, with gold-rimmed glasses and a face that bore no expression except professionalism. Everyone stood, everyone but Elijah. He simply tilted his head, eyes locked on the bench. The hearing began. Rosalind stepped forward and spoke, voice clear and firm. "Your Honor, we're requesting a motion to reopen the case based on newly surfaced evidence, including suspicious tax records, altered transaction files, and a compiled data set revealing at least 12 other families with mirrored irregularities tied to the same office that processed Mr. Carter's land claim." She projected the data on the screen, line by line, date by date, each detail stacking like bricks, building a case too patterned to be coincidence. Her delivery was relentless, each word precise, each fact a hammer striking at the system's numb facade. Andre watched her, fists clenched. Elijah, exhausted but alert, straightened with every mention of the name Ruth Carter. Then Rosalind raised a worn blue notebook and held it high. "And this," she said, "is the handwritten journal of Mrs. Ruth Carter, Mr. Elijah's wife. A woman in the last stage of her life who chose to spend her remaining time documenting what the system tried to hide." She placed the notebook gently on the judge's bench. "This is not sentiment. This is living evidence." Judge Wallace removed his glasses and looked at Rosalind, then to the three lawyers from Kingsland Development, seated stiffly in polished suits, expressions blank. One of them leaned forward, lifting an eyebrow. "Your Honor," he said, his tone silky, honed like a scalpel, "we've reviewed the materials. No evidence of forgery, no criminal intent. The discrepancies noted are consistent with recent system updates. Any overlap may be coincidental within rezoning districts." He paused, offered a practiced smile. "And the journal, while touching, is not admissible evidence. Courts do not adjudicate emotion." Elijah sighed. That kind of sigh only the chronically disregarded ever master. "Courts do not adjudicate emotion. But can justice exist without it?" Judge Wallace gave a measured nod, flipped through several pages, then lowered his pen. "After review," he said, eyes still on the documents, "the court finds insufficient grounds to reopen the case. The evidence presented does not conclusively prove intentional fraud or a criminal pattern. Any discrepancies appear to be administrative in nature." Rosalind froze. Andre rose suddenly from his seat, but she motioned him down. She closed her eyes for a moment, then looked to Elijah. He didn't yell. He didn't tremble. He stood, slowly. With each step, his cane tapped against the floor, like a metronome counting the last beats of a long, bruising hope. No one stopped him. The courtroom held its breath. He reached the bench, placed the journal down once more, this time with reverence. "Sir," he said, voice shaky with fatigue, not fear, "I'm not here to ask for pity. I don't need a single tear." His hand hovered over the worn cover. "But Ruth, my wife, wrote this every night. When the pain kept her from sleep, she wrote, not to grieve, to protect, the truth." Elijah lifted his gaze. For the first time, his eyes met Judge Wallace's. "You may dismiss me," he said, soft but unmistakably clear, "but you cannot dismiss her." No one moved, no one dared speak. Only the ticking clock and the weight of silence. In the gallery, a few people bowed their heads. Andre bit his lip. Rosalind gripped Elijah's arm and helped him back to his seat. Judge Wallace exhaled. It sounded almost like a sigh. "The matter is concluded," he murmured. "This hearing is closed." Elijah did not collapse, but the steps he took leaving that courtroom felt heavy enough to crack stone. Andre walked beside him, hand at his elbow. No reporters, no microphones, no headlines that day. Only the courthouse doors shutting again, for the second time. And yet, something remained behind. The journal, still resting on the judge's bench, its first page left open. The ink, still bold, read, "If they won't hear your voice, then make them read your words." The knock came at exactly 10:13 p.m. It wasn't frantic, like a messenger rushing with news, nor forceful, like police announcing a raid. It was slow, measured, deliberate, as if the person on the other side of the door already knew someone was home and was simply waiting for them to come face the inevitable. Andre glanced through the peephole. Marcus Wellstone, tall, slender, impeccably dressed in a charcoal tie and black suit. His face carried the still beauty of a Roman bust, smooth, refined, but his eyes held no warmth. They were the eyes of someone who had spent years bending laws like wire, a man who no longer believed in conscience, only in consequence. Andre hesitated for a heartbeat, then opened the door. "Apologies for the late hour," Marcus said, his voice low and soft, like velvet hiding a blade. "But I think we should talk, in private." They sat across from each other in the living room. Overhead, a single ceiling light cast a stark glow onto the wooden table between them. Elijah was fast asleep in the next room, sedated by heavy painkillers, unaware that a quiet storm had slipped past his front door. Marcus placed a thick envelope on the table. Inside, a prepared civil contract. $200,000, he said evenly. "No account trace, no paper trail. You sign. And stop updating that website. Take the files down. Erase every copy." Andre didn't move. His breathing slowed. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of what sat before him. "You think money's what I want?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He lifted the teacup Andre had poured, sipped delicately, and then spoke. "I think everyone needs money, especially when their grandfather is lying in that room, with a Kingsland insurance file that someone just happened to misplace." Andre's eyes snapped up. "What did you say?" Marcus's smile stayed where it was, barely there, sharp as a razor. Not sure who at Kingsland's medical division reached out to the hospital, but sometimes systems glitch. "That surgery next week? If the full payment isn't in place, well, it might have to be delayed." Silence. Not the kind of silence that invites calm, but the kind that wraps around your throat like wire, tightening with every breath. Marcus leaned in slightly, still speaking as if discussing weather patterns. "This isn't a threat. It's a choice. No one wants to watch their family die because they insisted on fighting for strangers." Andre didn't answer. For a long time, he just stared at the contract. The numbers were crisp, the terms clinical, everything about it polished, perfect, like a lie dressed for Sunday service. And at the bottom, in fine italic print, the kind that whispers instead of shouts, was the real message. Party B agrees not to disclose, distribute, or transmit any information related to the material obtained during the aforementioned period. Andre reached out. Marcus's brow lifted in quiet surprise. Andre picked up the pen, pressed his thumb against the cap, clicked it open, and wrote a single word across the contract. "No." Then he dropped the pen, tore the contract clean down the middle, and threw the pieces into the fireplace. The flames rose hungrily, swallowing every clause, every numbered line, every signature space that would never be filled. Marcus stood, still calm. No fury, no flinch. Just that same thin-lipped smile, as if he already had the next move planned. "Then let the truth protect your grandfather," he said smoothly. "If it's strong enough." He walked out without another word, didn't even look back. Andre remained standing, chest rising and falling fast like he'd just run a mile. His heart was pounding, not from fear, but because he knew, from that moment forward, there was no turning back. Elijah had grown noticeably weaker since the attack, and after a string of court hearings that led nowhere, the toll was written across every inch of his body. He still tried to carry himself with quiet dignity, but the long, rattling coughs, the labored breathing, and the dullness creeping into his once clear eyes all pointed to the same truth. Time was no longer on his side. One evening, as Andre brought a bowl of hot soup into the hospital room, Elijah motioned with a trembling hand, signaling that he wanted to speak. Andre leaned in close. Elijah whispered just one name. Jasmine Crockett. Only 3 syllables, but they opened a dozen questions in Andre's mind. The name didn't appear on any of the legal documents he'd reviewed, didn't match any attorneys they had worked with, and didn't belong to anyone he'd seen in the courtroom. Who was Jasmine Crockett? And why, in this fragile space between life and death, was she the only name his grandfather could summon? The next morning, Andre searched online. The name appeared quickly. Jasmine Crockett, U.S. Representative from Texas, once a celebrated civil rights attorney, known for her fierce interrogations of systemic injustice. But in recent years, it seemed she'd faded into the background, her public presence dimming, her voice less frequently heard. Andre kept digging. On her official contact page, something made him stop. Under her credentials was a line that sent a jolt through him. Former Director, Ruth's Circle Legal Center, 2012 to 2017. Ruth's Circle, a small legal nonprofit in the South that had once offered free legal aid to elderly women in underserved neighborhoods. It didn't take long for Andre to track down the office, a modest gray building at the end of Lamar Street in Dallas, marked only by a wooden sign carved with 3 simple words: Crockett, Integrity, Community. He arrived without an appointment, knocked once, no answer, knocked again. Then the door creaked open. A woman in her early 40s stood in the doorway, petite in stature, but with sharp, cutting eyes. Her hair was tied back, no makeup, no frills. Her voice was brisk. "I don't meet with press, and if you're here about an election, I have no plans to get back in the game." Andre didn't waste time. "I'm Elijah Carter's grandson." He laid a USB drive and a photocopy of Ruth's journal on the coffee table. "My grandmother was Ruth." The name struck something in Crockett. She didn't sit right away. She rested a hand on the edge of the table, her features, moments ago tight and detached, softening like someone hearing a name they thought they'd buried long ago. She looked at Andre for a long, searching moment. Then wordlessly, she sat down. Her fingers brushed the journal cover. She opened to the first page, the paper already yellowing, but the handwriting still strong and deliberate, like someone who knew her words had to carry weight. For a while, no one spoke. The silence stretched long and slow. Andre thought she might say no. But then, Crockett spoke, quietly, as if retrieving fragments of memory she hadn't meant to forget. "She wrote to me 3 years ago," she said. "A long letter, handwritten. A few tax documents were enclosed. I read it, but I never replied." She met Andre's eyes, for the first time, allowing the ache of regret to show. "At the time, I thought it was just another desperate voice in a pile of cries for help I got every week. I was wrong. I ignored one of the bravest women I never had the chance to meet." Andre didn't scold her. He simply said, in a voice soft as breath, "We don't need apologies. We just need someone who's willing to do what's right while there's still time." And that was when Crockett nodded. It wasn't just agreement, it was acceptance, a quiet but resolute acknowledgement of responsibility, as though she had been summoned not just to help, but to answer for something she had once turned away from. She opened her laptop and plugged in the USB. Her eyes moved quickly through the files, audio clips, and spreadsheets. She didn't ask questions. She didn't interrupt. She simply absorbed, line by line, as though she already knew what she was looking for. Then she picked up the phone. On the other end, a congressional advisor. The first words out of her mouth made Andre sit bolt upright. "I need to request an emergency hearing with the Subcommittee on Land and Property Rights. We have verifiable evidence of tax manipulation and illegal land seizure across at least 4 states. I'm requesting immediate legal protection for our key witness, Elijah Carter." Inside the courtroom, Andre wore a plain white shirt, his face hollow from too many sleepless nights. But his eyes, they were alive with clarity, burning with the kind of focus that only comes when someone is standing at the edge of a moment once dismissed as impossible. Beside him sat Crockett, calm, steady, unwavering. She didn't need to deliver a grand speech. She didn't need to dress the truth in fancy words. Because today the evidence spoke for itself. In hard files, clean numbers, cross-referenced datasets, Ruth's journal, a growing class action complaint, sworn testimonies from 4 different states, and most damning of all, an internal report leaked from within Kingsland Development, confirming over 47 instances of improper tax reimbursements in just 2 years. The judge entered. Julian Reeves, a seasoned black jurist known for his relentless pursuit of accountability, especially in cases involving systemic abuse. As he stepped into the courtroom, the room fell utterly silent. No cameras, no reporters, just silence and anticipation. The court has reviewed the complete record, Judge Reeves began, his voice deep and steady like a war drum, each word exact, measured, and irrefutable. This includes financial data from federal agencies, victim testimonies, and accompanying physical evidence. He paused only briefly before delivering what the room had come to hear. And the court finds that deliberate manipulation of tax documentation with the intent to unlawfully reassign land ownership occurred in no fewer than 18 confirmed cases. Kingsland Development exploited weaknesses in the municipal system in collusion with individuals from the local land office. The seizure of Mr. Elijah Carter's property is therefore deemed legally invalid. Andre lowered his head, his hands covering his face. The tears came quietly, without gasping or sobs. Just a release. Years in the making. Crockett reached for his wrist, holding it gently. A small gesture, but one full of meaning. Not just because they had won, but because they had chosen not to remain silent. Judge Reeves set the file aside and added, this time stepping away from protocol and speaking not from the bench, but from the heart. Mrs. Ruth Carter recorded what the law forgot. Today, the truth is not only restored, it is remembered. Then something unexpected happened. Elijah Carter stood. No cane, no assistance. Just the last reservoir of strength left in his body, willing him forward. Andre instinctively rose to stop him, but Elijah gently waved him off. In his hand was a small folded flag wrapped in soft fabric. It was the flag given to his father, Benjamin Carter, a black World War II veteran who had come home to a country that still refused to let him sit in the front of the bus, but who never stopped believing that a broken nation could still be mended. Elijah slowly removed the cloth, revealing the flag, and raised it high for the entire courtroom to see. And then he spoke. We defended this land with blood, and today, we keep it with the truth. The following spring, grass began to grow again on the land once claimed by Kingsland Development. The rusted iron fences were gone. The commercial redevelopment zone signs had been taken down. No more bulldozers clawing at the soil like they could erase the memory of an entire generation in the span of a few loud hours. Elijah Carter sat on a wooden bench beneath the porch overhang, his hand resting atop the worn head of his cane, his back slightly bowed, yet still carrying the quiet dignity of a man who had lived his whole life devoted to one unshakable thing: belief. The truth is a seed. Bury it in soil, crush it under stone, drown it in lies and neglect. But one day, when no one's watching, when no one expects it, it will rise, and it will carry the light with it.